For a while, there's been a lot of discourse online about the ethicality of true crime content, be it a YouTuber or a podcast or whatever. Some people say that all of it is weird no matter what, and some people say that, this creator does it in a bad way, but this creator does it in a good way. But even still, those creators who are considered good at doing it will still face controversies or backlash around their content. So the question is there an ethical way to create true crime content? And the TLDR is maybe. So if you were looking for a one-word answer, there it is. You can stop watching now, I guess, but if you want to know more about why, why is this considered unethical? Why is this such a murky area? What are some examples of good and bad? Then keep watching. True crime has been a fascinating genre or subject for some time now. Back in 1988, the documentary Thin Blue Line is largely credited with combining documentary and narrative to create the first modern-looking true crime storytelling. Watching that movie now, obviously it won't really seem revolutionary because basically every single true crime documentary since then has adopted the conventions that were used in that film. Going back even further than that though, in 1924 the first true crime magazine in the US was published called True Detective. And even way before that, in the 1600s, there were pamphlets and other forms of street literature that circulated in Great Britain about true crime. And obviously before the widespread digital media, books were the main form of true crime consumption. 40% of these true crime stories being about serial killers. In 1993, a survey was conducted by Publishers Weekly, which found that the most popular true crime books are the ones that focus on serial killers. And the more gruesome the content of the book, the better it would sell, which seems to be something that stays true today. Nowadays, many cable networks in the US also have a focus on true crime, like Forensic Files, and a lot of streaming services have also begun to capitalize on its popularity, like Netflix's Making a Murderer, and this isn't even touching on the fictional crime TV shows like Law and Order or Criminal Minds that sometimes take inspiration from true stories. And of course, we can't talk about true crime without talking about podcasts. My Favorite Murder is a very famous podcast, and I think the title of that podcast alone is a little weird, like, what do you mean your favorite murder? Anyway, the podcast Serial was released in 2014, and it broke the record of iTunes download numbers. It was something like 5 million in the first day of its release. And the first time I listened to Serial was actually what made me realize that some people who report true crime can be weird about it. Sarah Koenig is the host of Serial. And the podcast gained a lot of popularity when she investigated the murder of Heyman Lee, which happened in the 1990s in Maryland. Adnan Syed had been arrested for the murder, but that never sat right with many people. Rabia Chaudhry is the one who brought this case to Sarah Koenig's attention. She hoped that Koenig would rally behind Syed's innocence and would present to her audience the way that the case was mishandled. In 2014, Chaudhry was very vocal on her blog about how she was frustrated with the way that Serial and Sarah Koenig was handling the case, especially when Koenig's coverage drew to a close and she did not definitively say if she thought Syed was innocent or not, which was, the whole reason why Rabia Chaudhry brought it to Koenig's attention in the first place. Following this, Chaudhry released her own podcast covering the case, and she provided many key details that were conveniently left out of Serial, like many inconsistencies with the key witness of the case. Chaudhry also went on to write and publish a book about the case, as well as many tweets directly calling out Koenig and the Serial team. One of them reading, quote, "Serial set fire to Adnan's story, to some extent deliberately, and has never apologized or made amends. Should I be grateful? I find it hard to be, but I am grateful to the thousands that responded to the fire to help rebuild this house." end quote. Syed did end up getting released due to public demand to reinvestigate the case. Koenig released a follow-up episode following Syed's release, and in it she says, quote, "Even on a day when the government publicly recognizes its own mistakes, it's hard to feel cheered about a triumph of fairness because we've built a system that takes more than 20 years to self-correct. And that's just this one case," end quote. In response, Chaudhry tweeted, quote, "Again, a wishy-washy dismissal of the thousands of hours of work we put in to get the Juvenile Restoration Act passed in Maryland, reinvestigate the case, and find new evidence, and fight for every document from the state," end quote. Asia McLean Chaplin, who was a key witness for Syed during the case, and she was featured on Serial many times, also tweeted, quote, "I'm just gonna say it, I hate Serial and I feel like it lacked a real genuine concern for the people involved. I feel Sarah don't give a damn about any of us, Adnan included," end quote. It's very important to mention that Adnan Syed was a child to immigrant Muslim parents. And many people took issue with a white woman's opinion on an arrest that may have had some racial undertones, especially since her opinion did not seem to sway one way or the other. Dave Schilling at Vice wrote, quote, "The podcast is about Koenig sticking her white nose into the non-white lives of Lee and the man convicted of her murder, Adnan Syed. And Kang argues that she gets stuff wrong as a result of cultural differences. Late in his piece, Kang writes the listener is asked to simply trust Koenig's translation of two distinct immigrant cultures. I can think of no better definition of white privilege in journalism than that. Koenig isn't the problem in all of this, though. She's simply a person with a soothing voice and the absurdly inviolable job of public radio personality. It's not so much that Serial is a terrible podcast, it's that people who aren't white never seem to get the chance to make something like that. I get it, white liberals, you like the show. You hate the idea that your enjoyment of the show makes you somehow racist or complicit in racism. It makes you nervous that a non-white person is aware of your consumption habits and looking down upon you for them. I hear you." End quote. But this was not the only reason people took issue with Koenig's coverings of Lee's case. As I mentioned earlier, it was also her lack of transparency with key details and also just the overall vibe of how she told the story. Tilly Burlock at the Tribune writes, quote, "Koenig's narration, however, blurs the line between straight-up reporting and something more opinionated. Serial is not only about Syed and Lee. It's about Koenig's storytelling, an unconventional structure that lands Serial in an ethical gray area, revealed by Koenig's relationship with Syed, tendency to withhold information, and neglect of Lee's family. In turning Heyman Lee's murder into a dramatized whodunit, Koenig transforms the real people involved into characters who no longer have agency over how their story is told, as is often the case with true crime. Koenig's reporting of an investigation she had not finished, along with her tendency to withhold information for the sake of cliffhangers, further provoked listeners to conduct their own research at the cost of Lee's privacy. Koenig allowed millions of listeners to justify poring over a dead girl's diary, speculating about Lee's relationships, and posting outlandish conspiracies all over the internet." End quote. Lee's family made it abundantly clear that they did not want their daughter's murder plastered all over the internet, but unfortunately, when the conspiracy theories start, they're very hard to stop. Not to mention that following the success of Serial, it got renewed for a second season, as well as an HBO documentary, and it was bought by the New York Times for $25 million, allowing Sarah Koenig to financially benefit from this case while Syed and Lee just became kind of buzzwords thrown around the internet in a who do you think did it way. Overall, the general criticism of Koenig's coverage is that she's more of a storyteller than a reporter. She adds in intense music and leaves the episodes on cliffhangers, and she calls, random ass people during the podcast anytime she finds a new lead, talking about it with them as if it's high school gossip. And I think that this is a lot of people's main issues with true crime content creators. It's not so much that they are telling the story, but the way in which they tell the story. Bailey Sarian is probably the most famous true crime YouTuber with over 7 million subscribers, but that doesn't mean her content goes without controversy. Her true crime series, titled Murder, Mystery, and Makeup, is exactly what it sounds like. She recounts a true crime case while doing her makeup. She's been uploading content for over 9 years now, and the first 2.5 or so years of her content was just normal makeup tutorials with an occasional story time sprinkled in. Her first true crime video, to my knowledge, was on the Watts family case, uploaded about 6 years ago, and this video has over 11 million views, which is an insanely large increase to what the rest of her videos were getting. The few before it were sitting between 60,000 and 300,000. So obviously she was going to continue to make true crime content after that. And this is where I believe one of the main issues with true crime content lies. Monetization. Once a YouTuber realizes the high demand for true crime content, it's only going to incentivize them to make more. And this is generally where a true crime content creator goes from genuinely caring about these stories and wanting to get justice for the victims to pumping out content because they know it makes them a shit ton of money. Since her first true crime video, almost every other video posted to Bailey's channel is a true crime one. And the view difference is staggering. Every true crime video on her channel has at least 2 million views, while her others are usually sitting below 500,000. And this is where things start to get kind of murky, because it's weird to say that a YouTuber shouldn't make money off of the videos that they're making. But I don't know, I feel like there might be a certain way to go about it. Like ad reads, for example. Obviously, if a YouTuber is getting over 1 million views on every single true crime video they post, brands are gonna want to sponsor them. You know, that's just how YouTube and capitalism works. But many people have an issue with how these ad reads are placed. Sometimes they're insensitively placed throughout the video, meaning, you know, the creator will be in the middle of talking about how the victim was murdered, and then all of a sudden they're talking about, like, NordVPN. And similarly with the criticisms about Sarah Koenig, how much of that money is going to the victims' families? It just feels kind of icky to me to make money off of other people's trauma and most likely not letting those actually affected get a cent of it. Or at least give it to, like, a women's charity, since a lot of these true crime videos are just talking about how women are brutally assaulted. I don't know. I'm also not pretending to have or know any answers to all of these issues. All I'm trying to do is present the most common issues people have with these types of videos and letting you draw your own conclusions. To go back to The Thin Blue Line, the purpose of that documentary was to showcase how a man was wrongly convicted and how the police horribly mishandled the case. And at least in my own opinion, I feel like this is where the line is drawn for me with true crime. If a creator is making a video about a true crime case in order to highlight the inconsistencies with the prosecution and how the police had an agenda, and, you know, they're making the video to try and give the victim and the wrongly convicted justice, I feel like that's okay in most cases, as long as it's handled in a sensitive manner and there's actual evidence to support the fact that the case was mishandled. But I feel like when a creator is talking about a true crime case just to retell the story, I'm just kind of turned off by that. Not only are they making money from it, they're also not doing it with a purpose. I guess you could argue the purpose is to, like, make people more vigilant so they don't become victims of a similar crime, but that just kind of seems like a weird excuse to me. And again, I'm not claiming to have all of the answers, but to go back to Bailey, another issue many have with her content is the fact that she's doing her makeup. And I know that's a little hypocritical coming from me right now, but give me some slack, okay? And the reason people have issue with her doing her makeup is because it seems like the true crime story isn't entertaining enough to be on its own. You know, she needs to be doing something else in order to maintain people's attention, or, you know, the story isn't good enough to warrant its own video with nothing else going on in the background. Also, the act of doing makeup while talking on YouTube is usually synonymous with gossip or storytime videos. So it just feels weird to sort of alike true crime content with that genre, boiling these cases down to just gossip or a story time. It's the same exact issue people had with Sarah Koenig. You know, it just completely ignores the fact that actual lives were harmed and changed and traumatized in these cases. Also, not to mention her thumbnails, which is always her, like, serving face with the murderer's mugshot in the background. And the titles are also very gossipy, too. One of them is Trapped and Left to Die in a Suitcase. What the fuck was Sarah Boone thinking? Or Failed Country Music Star Turned Fast Food Killer. What was going on with Paul Dennis Reed? The verbiage of these titles just feel too Gossip Girl texts to me and many others. Also, this isn't meant to be a Bailey Sarian hit piece. I just used her as an example because she is so popular and she faces so much backlash from her content. But these problems are not unique to her. So many other true crime content creators make the same insensitive choices that just sensationalize the case as opposed to trying to bring justice. The most common comment I'll see under a post talking about a specific true crime creator are people saying like, oh, I really used to love their content, but then they started to get insensitive about it. And I think that desensitization plays a large part in why so many of these creators fall down this pipeline of disrespect. Obviously, if you are consuming so much content on a daily basis about brutal murders, you're eventually going to get desensitized to the violence, which might make you talk about the cases with less sensitivity. And this is not just about the creators, it's also about the consumers. People who constantly listen to true crime are usually the ones who are theorizing and giving their takes about what they think happened, and they think it's a flex that they can listen to so much of this content without getting disturbed. Being a true crime fan has become somewhat of a personality trait online. I saw this TikTok from Brielle Belly, and I think it's a great example of why a lot of people have issues with true crime content. So I'm gonna play that now.
I cannot fucking stand the true crime community. And this comes as somebody that used to only strictly listen to true crime from when I was like 15 to 21. I've always been fascinated in like, okay, but why? But what makes people do such terrible, horrible things? Like, that's always been my, like, it's like a morbid curiosity. So I understand why people are intrigued, I guess. What really started to get me was when people come on this app and be like, my favorite case, my favorite unsolved case. What the fuck do you mean favorite? Favorite mass unaliving case? Favorite serial unaliving? What the fuck are you talking about? So that pissed me off. And then the conspiracy theorists, okay? Back when I was really into true crime, I wasn't really on TikTok like that, or like I was, but nobody was like talking about it on there. And if it was like a sad slideshow talking about like the victims. None of this conspiracy theory bullshit when I was watching and consuming that type of content. But the way these people are talking about it is fucking sick and twisted and disturbing. I remember exactly where I was when I found out about the Idaho students' tragic fucking mass unaliving in their college house, and I literally my whole body was shaking because I was literally living in an off-campus apartment at the time, and it just hit so close to home. It felt so real. I was like in tears. I felt sick to my stomach, and I remember people were conspiring that the roommates had something to do with it, and I've never felt so much anger and frustration for these girls that I never even met before. I'm like, I can't even fucking imagine what they're going through. They just lost all of their friends, and they're having these people online talking about, oh yeah, they probably were in on it, they didn't didn't call the police? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? And I just don't understand why people love to just comment on other people's trauma. It's fucking trauma. You don't know. I always would watch true crime because I want to know how the brain works. And you do not understand how the brain works in times of trauma, extreme fear, and shock. You don't fucking know. So everyone likes to say, oh, well, if it was me, I would have done this. If it was me, I would have done that. You don't fucking know, and also it wasn't you. So, good thing. Like, good thing it fucking wasn't you. Aren't you happy? Oh my god. And I never, ever, ever will forgive. I hope you guys feel like fucking pieces of shit. Because now that the 911 call is released and everyone realizes, oh, their roommates actually had nothing to do with it, I hope you feel like shit. And another thing, they never release all of the shit to the public, or else there would be not a fair trial. The fuck? Like, what is wrong with you guys? You don't even have half the information, so shut the fuck up. And now, with the missing college student, everyone I just saw this morning, her mom requested that she be declared as unalived, which is terrible and sad, and I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what she's going through. All the comments are, why would you do that? If I was a mother, I'm a mother, and I would never fucking do that. I would look for her forever, and I would never do that. And she's not. What if she's not? And what if, okay, it's not your daughter, so you have really no say. Like, how about that? How about everything needs to stop being publicized? You need to realize that these people are real with real families and real friends that lost something. Like, oh my god.
So not only does desensitization allow for one to make insensitive jokes or ad segues in a video, but it's also the thing that gives way for conspiracy theories. As Brielle mentioned, the Idaho 4 case was huge online with the true crime community. And the desensitization that many have for this type of content allowed for people to talk about these victims as if they're movie characters as opposed to real people. And as mentioned before with Sarah Koenig's controversy, the whodunit of it all is so insensitive. If your first reaction to hearing about a murder is not to feel sympathy or sadness for the victim and their family, and is instead to put on your detective hat and try to sleuth out who the killer is yourself publicly online, that's a problem. I also think it is extremely dangerous when desensitization is combined with the hive mind mentality that occurs online. The true crime documentary Don't Fuck with Cats tells the story about how an online Facebook group managed to catch Luca Magnotta after he posted videos online of him killing cats. This Facebook group was insanely popular, like tens of thousands of members popular. And the group ended up harassing a random man online because a lot of them believed that he was the one posting these videos, despite the fact that all of the evidence they had collected pointed a totally different direction. So many people were so convinced that this was the man who did it that they all harassed him online until he tragically took his own life. And this man was not Luca Magnotta. He was not the one posting these videos. This conspiratorial thinking is so incredibly dangerous. It can lead to people being harassed and having their lives ruined or taken from them. Not to mention that the public doesn't even get all of the information about these cases. Like, God only knows how many pages of classified information the police have about these unsolved cases. Like, the people who go online and are convinced they know who killed JonBenet Ramsey, we just have to accept that we don't know all of the information, and we're not supposed to because it's not our job to solve these cases. It's just like a newer, weirder, lamer version of vigilantism. And this desensitization also allows for people to get hyper-focused on the murderer instead of the victims. How many serial killers can you name off the top of your head right now? Okay. Now, how many victims of serial killers can you name off the top of your head right now? I mentioned Don't Fuck with Cats before, and one of the most heartbreaking moments in that series is at the end of the last episode. Junlin was the victim of Luca Magnotta, and in the last episode, Junlin's friend Benjamin Zhu says, quote, "The really sad thing is, everyone is talking about Luca Magnotta, but nobody has ever remembered Junlin. That doesn't seem fair at all to my friend." And this is just one case where there was one victim involved. Imagine how many other friends or family members of someone who was murdered are out there who feel the exact same way when they see their loved one's murderer in the thumbnail of a YouTube video with some girl's serving face in front of him. We've created a culture where it is so normalized to talk so casually and publicly about murderers and murder victims that we tend to forget that they are real people. It's kind of a parasocial relationship. People feel a sense of connection or superiority that their opinion of this case is the correct one, and therefore they have the right to talk about it. And so the question still remains, is there a way to do this ethically? The issue with calling something ethical or unethical is that ethics itself is so subjective to each individual and culture that declaring something as totally ethical or totally unethical is virtually impossible. And I could sit here and I could run true crime content through every single famous philosopher's theory of ethics, but I feel like that's a little pointless. Generally, the collected, accepted definition of something being ethical is if you're doing something with good intentions and the outcome of those actions will do more good than harm. It's a net positive. And so this is where I'm going to say my personal opinion with true crime content. As I mentioned before, I think Thin Blue Line can be considered a net positive for true crime. It told the story with the narrative of Randall Adams, who was wrongly convicted, and eventually he was released from prison because of this. The difference between this and Adnan Syed getting released because of Serial was the way in which the story was told. Thin Blue Line provided evidence that 5 witnesses committed perjury. The story came to a definitive conclusion by the end of the documentary. Additionally, the point of the film was less so to say who they think did the murder, and more so to show how law enforcement was corrupt in handling the case. It was punching up, in a sense, right? The responsibility was on the police. Hence the title, Thin Blue Line. It's literally making a joke about how the police department fucked up. With Serial and Koenig's covering of Heyman Lee's murder, she never paid much attention to the corruption of the police department and usually would gloss over the racial undertones of Adnan Syed being the one arrested. Instead, she turned the case into a new JonBenet Ramsey or Madeleine McCann whodunit. Although yes, Syed did get released, that wasn't without the internet going into a frenzy about the case, breaching the privacy of the Lee family, and overall just being incredibly disrespectful. And in all fairness, Thin Blue Line did come out in the 1980s. There was no internet for people to be talking about it on. So just for shits and giggles, if we assume that there is no way to talk about a true crime case without the internet going wild about it, that begs the question, does that mean these content creators have a responsibility to not talk about these cases? We've seen the way the internet responds to true crime. Madeleine McCann, Adnan Syed, the Idaho 4, Gabby Petito, these all took the internet by storm. And it seems like maybe the obvious way to prevent the internet from being obsessive and insensitive is to not have content creators talking about and encouraging these theories and behaviors, especially when the case isn't solved. As I said earlier, the true crime stories that I enjoy hearing about are the ones where the police or the FBI are the ones who totally fucked up, like Ruby Ridge or Waco, where the blame isn't placed on individuals, but rather the institutions at large. It starts a dialogue about our justice system. Because in most coverings of unsolved cases, people love to theorize and definitively claim it was this person who did it. And again, even with Ruby Ridge or Waco, there are definitely sensitive and insensitive ways to talk about those situations. This is what I meant earlier by this topic is so murky, because you can sit here and pick apart every last detail. An example of a video that I think did a good job of not glamorizing the murderer is Wendigoon's video about Ted Kaczynski. And trust me, I am fully, completely aware that a lot of people have a lot of issues with Wendigoon. But the reason I'm bringing up this one video in particular is because Kaczynski, the Unabomber, tends to get too much credit. There are a lot of 16-year-old edgelord tankies who read his manifesto and think he was a genius. And yeah, on paper, he was a genius, right? He graduated high school at like 14 or 15 or something. His manifesto is not anything crazy. And that is something that Wendigoon spent a lot of time talking about in his video. He tore apart the idea that his manifesto is this brilliant piece of writing, because in reality it's just like restating a bunch of Marxist ideas with big words and synonyms. And I liked how that was the narrative of Wendigoon's video. He basically just countered everything that people like to give Kaczynski credit for. Anyway, that's my little Unabomber rant over. But you can also make the argument that if you're interested in a true crime case, read the Wikipedia article about it. Do you really need to hear about a murder with a girl doing her makeup in the background? I also think that internet culture as a whole is a large part as to why true crime has become the way it is. The way that we live in a society where people feel the need to share every thought they're thinking all the time online without understanding the concept that people are hearing those words and maybe hurt by those words. Hi, just wanted to add this in. I also think we need to stop with the whole fucking unaliving and graped, like using those words to talk about murder and rape, because that just further divides the action from the person. Like calling someone a grapist doesn't hold the same weight as just calling them what they are, which is a rapist. Call them a rapist because that's what they are. It's like, not to say it's 1984, but like it's literally just double think. Like you're making new words that don't carry the same weight, which only makes it so much worse. You're just making it more normalized to talk about these things in such a more casual manner, and it shouldn't be casual. There should be nothing casual about the word murder or the word rape or rapist or murderer. There shouldn't be casuality around that at all. And I hate that we use PC words to refer to actions that should not be made child-friendly or user-friendly or whatever the fuck. Just use the actual word, because that's what they are. Call them a murderer, call them a rapist. Stop creating a divide between the person and their actions. And I know that people are using those words because they're scared of being, they're scared of the video getting taken down, like especially on TikTok. They're scared of being censored and getting the video taken down, but I've seen videos where people use those words and they're not taken down. Like, I don't know where that rumor came from, that if you use those words, the video is gonna get taken down, but it's not true. And also, you just sound fucking goofy talking about a murder case and using the word unalived or using the word graped. You sound fucking goofy. That is so insanely stupid and insensitive to the people that were involved. Just call a spade, use the actual words. You know, put on your fucking big boy pants and use the real words. I also feel like a general baseline of true crime content should be reaching out to the families, you know, asking if they want this case to be talked about or not. And if the family says no, don't make a video about it. Like, Ryan Murphy making an entire series about Jeffrey Dahmer without asking any of the victims' families for permission, actually, that drives me. Ryan Murphy needs to go to jail. He needs to do jail time. Someone needs to prevent that man from ever stepping foot into a writer's room ever again. And don't even get me started on his Menendez brothers thing. I also think that morbid curiosity definitely plays a part in this huge interest in true crime. You know, I mean, why else would people willingly watch, like, Human Centipede? But we can't always let our morbid curiosity be the leading force of our brains. Sometimes we have to practice self-discipline. And obviously, by the way I'm talking, I'm sure you could gather that most true crime content is not for me. Does that make this video incredibly biased? Yes. But that's not to say I've never had an interest in criminology. For a few years of my life, I really wanted to be a forensic scientist. And then, I realized that there was a lot more math involved in that than I anticipated, so I promptly backed out of that one. And that's a point that I see a lot of people make when they talk about why they love true crime so much, because they're interested in the psychology of it all. And that's fine. Criminal psychology is a college major and a career path for a reason. But if that is your true intention, why not just read a book written by a professional criminal psychologist, instead of listening to a YouTuber who most likely does not have a degree in the area? Because a professional psychologist has to follow, like, HIPAA, or whatever the ethical standards are when discussing these cases publicly. Especially when factoring in desensitization and how that allows for the content to be insensitive. Realistically, how long can one make true crime content without being desensitized? Is that even possible? Because if we're factoring in a YouTuber's upload schedule, be it once a day, once a week, once a month, the platform demands that you upload content on a somewhat regular basis. So you need to be consuming true crime content on a somewhat regular basis in order to make a living, which may just end up leading down the path of insensitivity. Because also, who gets to determine if a video is insensitive or not? Should it be the creator and the internet? Or should it be the loved ones and the family of the victim? Overall, I think determining if true crime content is ethical can be maybe answered by asking the question, does this video provide a net positive? And should we view our own entertainment as a net positive? Because personally, I think the respect of the victims and their loved ones should outweigh our need for constant entertainment. And I didn't even touch on hybristophilia, which is just like a whole other thing in of itself. But anyway, that's my general synopsis on why this content is so controversial, and my opinions about it, and how I think people should proceed with this type of content. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear if you do have any creators that have never been controversial with their videos. I think that would be interesting to hear about. And I'd like to hear if you disagree with me, if you disagree with all of my points about this being kind of weird and skeevy a little bit. Yeah. Thanks for watching, though.